Let me first welcome House Republicans back to the Congress after their 7-week taxpayer-funded vacation. These people have been missing in action, absent without official leave, running scared, but they can no longer hide.
Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries yesterday on Capitol Hill. It comes as Speaker Mike Johnson today is expected to gavel in the first full session of the House since September 19th.
Wow.
He's also expected to swear in a Democrat from Arizona who won her special election days after Johnson shut down the House. We'll go through all of that and what it means. Plus, we'll play for you President Trump's comments on H-1B visas, which have angered some of his MAGA base. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Wednesday, November 12th. Along with Willie, Joe, and me, we have the co-host of our fourth hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire. Politics reporter for Semaphore, Dave Weigel is here. Writer-at-large for The New York Times, Elizabeth Buemiller joins us. And, of course, the host of Way Too Early, MSNBC's senior Capitol Hill reporter, Ali Vitale. So maybe the end is near, Joe, to the shutdown.
It could be, Willie, and of course, how fascinating that they haven't worked since middle of September. They're coming back, and they're coming back and finally swearing in a congresswoman that should have been sworn in months ago.
Yeah, Congresswoman Grijalva was elected on September 23rd, so 7 weeks and change, I think that is. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what her vote means to many votes in the House, including on the release of the Epstein files. So she will be sworn in, we think, later today, finally, at long last. Speaker Johnson had said as soon as the government is shut down, we will give her her seat. She will be sworn in. And now, after 8 weeks, Congress, the House, back in session. Republicans had been back home in their districts, and Democrats in the last 24 hours or so characterizing that as an 8-week paid vacation for them, while Americans were not getting paid and were not receiving things like SNAP benefits.
Yeah, of course, members of Congress getting paid to not work, while people in the federal government were actually working and not getting paid. Must be nice job if you can get it. So this morning, if you look at the leads of the New York Times and the Washington Post, what it shows is something that I actually found was one of my favorite sayings. It's proving one of my favorite sayings that came out of my time in Washington, D.C. Paul Simon, who, not the singer, but the senator from Illinois, when he was leaving Washington, someone asked, well, what have you learned in Washington? What's the one big takeaway? And Senator Simon said, well, in politics, sometimes when you win, you lose. And sometimes when you lose, you win. Well, this morning, the New York Times and the Washington Post are explaining how Democrats on the Hill, they're a little slow sometimes, but they catch up. Democrats on the Hill now are finally beginning to realize that they just may have won this government shutdown. And more importantly than that, they may have put themselves in a position to win the larger war on health care costs when this battle is rejoined in January. And it will be rejoined in January. And by the time we have another government shutdown, if Republicans don't understand just how bad the affordability crisis is, because our president certainly doesn't, but if they don't understand that, well, there will be another government shutdown. And when there is, Americans will be focused laser-like on health care costs because their premiums will have already gone up, and because the Democrats did something right during this government shutdown. They focused Americans on the issue of health care costs. It's really kind of remarkable if you think about it. Here you had the Democratic Party trying to help Americans, and in the process, they actually would have helped Donald Trump and the Republicans on the affordability issue. But the Republicans kept brushing them away. They kept the most potent issue in Democrats' hands by pushing away and not going along with them to help middle-class Americans with rising health care costs. You know, It would be kind of like if somebody came into 30 Rock. Let's say there was a rat infestation problem. And they went to the people who ran 30 Rock and said, hey, we can take care of your rat problem. But people that ran 30 Rock said, no, we like rats. Rats are our friends. In fact, some of our greatest memories at 30 Rock involved rats. Well, what would you say? All right. Live with the rats, but you'll be calling me later. Well, that's the same thing that's going to happen. Well, not the same thing, but you get my gist. That's going to happen in January because Willie, and yes, I am going to drag you into this, whether you like it or not. Willie, the fact of the matter is that you do have Republicans that are strapped with an affordability crisis. Members of Congress understand this affordability crisis. They understand that health care premiums are about to skyrocket. They understand they have a president that's going on national television saying, oh, we don't have an affordability crisis. And they're going to be set up for failure in January, where Democrats have framed this issue perfectly over the past few months. So maybe, yes, maybe some late night comedians are going around and they're owning the Democrats for being the surrender caucus. But as Paul Simon said, sometimes when you win, you lose, and when you lose, you win. The New York Times and the Washington Post suggesting that maybe more Democrats who were upset a couple of days ago are understanding this is actually unfolding in a way that will benefit them, and more importantly, middle class and working class Americans in January.
Paul Simon, 30 Rock rats, they really had it all there, Joe, and brought it home.
Thank you so much.
I didn't see anything scurry along the floor like Mika did yesterday, so I think we're safe today on the rat front.
For now.
But for the moment. But yeah, I think the concern from many Democrats is that Republicans said, those moderates, Democrats who did vote with Republicans, vote with us now, and we'll give you the vote on Obamacare subsidies later in the year. I think other Democrats don't trust that. They say maybe they'll give us the vote, but they're not going to vote for it. We're not going to get the subsidies. But I take your larger point, which is taking the long view that the issue of health care and those costs, and more broadly, affordability, are winning ones for Democrats. And Jonathan, we had yesterday the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, sitting right here and asking him if he thought that the president's comments that the affordability issue was a hoax or a con job and all the things he's been calling it were accurate, just to see if that was a one-off. And he seemed to suggest that, yes, Americans don't understand that the tariffs will benefit them eventually, that these costs at the moment, they might be high, but they're going to come down. Not saying I didn't expect him to cross the president sitting here with us, but the point is there does seem to be a dismissal from this administration of the fact, not the perception, not the media's narrative, that it's too expensive to live in America.
Yeah, any Trump cabinet official goes on television with the job number one is to perform for the president. Yeah. And that's certainly what we heard from the Treasury Secretary yesterday. He wasn't going to contradict what Trump said. But there does seem to be a growing sense that the White House is out of touch with how Americans feel. This is a president, I mean, any president lives in a bubble. This one in particular, very insular, very right-wing echo chamber. He hasn't done really any domestic travel where he would meet not just voters, but even like local officials who might tell him, like, sir, maybe with tears in their eyes, sir, that like prices are too high. My voters here are having a hard time. There has been some private, as I've reported, some private discussions in the White House. They recognize that they've kind of dropped the ball on affordability. They recognize that that was their signature issue in 2024, and they haven't done anything on it. But instead, we're getting these in-your-face images of ballrooms, the East Wing being torn down, ballrooms being built, Great Gatsby parties. The list goes on and on. And it does, tax breaks for the rich, of course. And it does seem that Democrats have a good issue here that was successful at the elections last week. They stumbled. The intra-party fighting here about the shutdown is not helpful for that narrative, Joe. But Donald Trump and President Trump seems to be unwilling to, because he's so unwilling to ever admit a mistake. He's unwilling to acknowledge, publicly anyway, that they have had a problem here. And that puts him really out of touch with his vote. Look, his hardcore base will be with him no matter what. They're thrilled that half the White House is gone. But those voters who swing back and forth right now, polls suggest, election results suggest, they're disappointed.
Well, and you listen to Laura Ingraham on Fox News during that interview. It suggests that she, too, understands the president. I'm not putting words in her mouth, but on some issues, the president seemed to be out of touch when, you know, she kept asking him about the affordability crisis. And he said, there's no affordability crisis, fake news, fake polls, fake this, fake that. There are also some just absolutely fascinating moments in that interview where he's saying there's not really much of a difference between whether we have Chinese students here, French students, right? There's not difference between China and France, is there? She goes, yeah, there is. And then, of course, no such thing as gold paint, as if he had never walked through the lobby of Mar-a-Lago before. We could go on and on and on, but there was a real disconnect, Mika, especially on the affordability issue.
Yes.
You even had Jerry Baker, who's the editor emeritus over at the Wall Street Journal, saying, okay, the Republicans are fumbling this affordability issue, and right now, instead, they're obsessing over whether you platform a white nationalist who admires Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. Maybe this party is disconnected. So again, this is not something that the New York Times editorial page or MSNBC Primetime's talking about. This is something Republicans are talking about. This is something that House members are talking about. This is something that Senate members are talking about. And they are very concerned that they're getting more and more disconnected from the very issue, affordability, that put Donald Trump in the White House. Remember all the snotty comments about butter, right? And, oh, they're all well, it's actually health care now.
Correct.
And it's a fact that people can't afford homes. And it's a fact, speaking of being out of touch, when Laura Ingraham politely was trying to explain, hey, these 50-year mortgages may not be a good idea. He goes, what's the difference between the 40-year mortgages we have now? And trust me, if there were 40-year mortgages, I would have gotten them a long time ago. Laura Ingraham had to politely say 30-year mortgages. But there's this disconnect, a growing disconnect. You know, while people are struggling with an affordability crisis, Donald Trump is tearing down half the White House and putting up a Marie Antoinette ballroom. And people, Republicans, conservatives, writers, podcasters, they're the ones that are beginning to express real concerns like, hey, we just got crushed at the ballot box last week. If we continue going like this, 2026 is going to be terrible.